For months, my friend has been terrified about what's been happening outside her house, and now that it's finally over, she gave me permission to share her story. Annabelle has lived in the same house for years, but suddenly one day, as she's going from her car into the house, she hears whistling, and it sounds pretty close by, so much so that she's convinced that there must be a person somewhere on her property. She looked around and no one was there, so she just went on in the house. But over time, this kept happening. And it seemed like the whistling was kind of getting further away, like it was getting quieter. But every time she would look around and there would be no one there. As it continued happening, she started noticing patterns. For one, it would only happen if she was alone. She would never hear the whistling if anyone else was with her, including her young daughter. Two, it only happened when she was outside. She would never hear the whistling when she was in the house. And three, it continued to sound like it was getting further and further away because the whistling continued to get more quiet. But since the whistling didn't seem like it was going to stop, Annabelle went searching for answers, including asking some friends in the paranormal community. And what she found out is that there's a Venezuelan legend about a whistler, a mysterious whistling meant to serve as a warning. And as it sounds further away, the entity is actually closer. So she started to become worried that acknowledging it might be encouraging it. So she no longer reacted to it when she heard it. She wouldn't look around anymore. She would just pretend like she didn't hear it. And she would only talk about it if she was away from home. But near the end of the experience, it changed. She started hearing it inside the house. It was extremely faint, and she would hear it even if her daughter was around. And she started getting concerned about what was about to happen. And then suddenly, with no explanation, the whistling just stopped. And it's been gone for several weeks now. But a few weeks after it stopped, her father had a heart attack, and she's really not sure if they're related or not. She's still really not sure what this was, and she's looking for answers. She's tagged below, so if you have any ideas about what it was, or if you've ever heard of something like this before, let us know in the comments. And follow for more scary stories.
My husband didn't appreciate my delicious dinner. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's scary story. It had been so long since I made us a real home-cooked meal. I spent all afternoon making pasta from scratch and following my mother's recipe for bolognese. Caesar salad, dressing from scratch. Even baked some rolls. When I say it took half of the morning and all afternoon, I mean it. I couldn't have been more excited for dinner. When my husband got home from work, late like usual, I told him to get ready to eat. He looked so confused. As we sat across from each other, he hesitantly pushed the noodles around on his plate. What did you do to it? You think I'm an idiot? This is the first meal you've cooked for me in months. Months! What did you do to it? He began smelling the plate of pasta. It's my mother's recipe. Don't play dumb with me. Is it poisoned? I beg your pardon? I guess I gotta give you credit. I thought you were too dumb to figure it out. What? Did you look through my phone? I always delete the messages, so you would have needed perfect timing. Richard, what are you talking about? My affair. You've discovered it, haven't you? And now you're trying to poison me. Oh God. He picked up some of the meat with his fingers, feeling the squish. Is this Abby? Did you turn her into bolognese? God, you're sick. I don't know what you're talking about. I was beginning to tear up. I just wanted to make us a nice dinner. What do you mean you're having an affair? Oh, don't act surprised. You haven't loved me in a long time. Richard, don't Richard me. He grabbed the plate, walked over to me, and slammed it in front of me. Eat it. I hesitated. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen block and pointed it at me. Eat it. Tears streamed from my face. As I shoved the pasta into my mouth, I tried to chew. If you hurt her, he said, I swear I'll kill you. Abby really loves me. Not like you. Richard, I do love you. She better not be hurt. He took out his phone and placed a call. She didn't pick up. What did you do to her? Please, I don't know what you're talking about. He quickly grabbed his keys. I swear if you hurt her. He ran out the door and sped out of the driveway. I took a napkin and wiped my messy mouth. I entered our guest bedroom and opened the closet door. Abby was gagged and tied up, tears streaming down her face. He's going to save you right now, but I've got a terrible feeling his brakes are going to fail. Oh well, we have some business to take care of, but my dinner is getting cold. I'll be back when it's done. I closed the closet doors and went to the kitchen to finish my delicious meal.
There was an Appalachian woman in the 1800s who owned a brothel, and she supposedly still haunts the town. This woman, Pocahontas Hale, owned a brothel called the Black Shaw in downtown Bristol, Virginia. It was on State Street where the Cameo Theater sits now. She came to Bristol right after the Civil War and helped the wounded soldiers using her herbal remedies. By the late 1860s, there were several brothels in Bristol, but the Black Shaw was the largest and the first. Pocahontas was reportedly 6 feet tall and always dressed in black. People would say she looked like a haint even though she was still alive, or a century-year-old grandmother who escaped the cemetery. She always wore a black shawl even in summer, hence the name of her brothel, and long black gloves no matter the weather. She claimed to be Cherokee, but no one ever really knew for sure. She was known to be able to see the future, and people would go to her to get their fortune told. Have you ever heard of water witching? Well, it was said that this woman could do that without a divining rod. She used her leg instead. She would look at the ground, mutter some words, and her leg would stomp and jerk when she got near water. She would charge $10 to find water for people, and apparently she was never wrong. She also did grave witching. Her ghost is known to be seen on State Street even in broad daylight. There's a cemetery in Bristol where the most wealthy people in the town were buried at that time, and she was denied burial there. Even though she had become very prosperous as a madam, she was buried in a segregated cemetery called Flat Hollow instead. There's a legend that when she was being buried, patrons of the Black Shaw were digging her grave, and a large black snake circled around the grave hissing. During the funeral, the snake came back, and they all got scared and ran away. When they finally came back to fill the grave, the snake came back again and crawled on top of it. After she was buried, people would see her ghost walking through the cemetery. There's now an apartment complex called Rice Terrace where the cemetery was. This cemetery was moved in the 1940s when they put up the apartment complex. And the graves were dug up and relocated to what is now Citizens Cemetery.
Welcome to the Midnight Sesh. We have had some flavors. Now let's get into the story. I was doing a job in Starksville, Mississippi. Me and my buddy decided to go and see where Robert Jackson had supposedly sold his soul to the devil. So we went to Starksdale where the coordinates were supposed to be. We arrived at this gas station at around 5 p.m. and it looked like it was about to fall apart. It was dilapidated and you'd expect it to be abandoned. We walked in on only to be greeted by this beautiful girl standing there and asking if we had reservations. I said no. She said no problem and that we always have room. We walked in and it looked like a place from the 1950s. Nothing but beautiful people inside. And the cooks were even wearing all white with their white paper hats. It was like stepping into another era. We sat down. They brought us bread and RC Cola, not Coke, but RC. We're talking and placing our orders while eating bread as we wait. Not once was our bread basket empty, and not one time did I need a refill. But no one had come by to serve us. We looked at our watches and my buddy said, "Dude, we've been here for 2 hours." But it felt like 5 minutes. I told him, "Let's get out of here." So we got up and 2 large men asked if we were going. We said we were just stepping out for some air. We walked out and there were no cars at all, only our truck. I walked around the building and there were no cars outside yet. The place was full on the inside. So we left in a hurry, threw the GPS back to our hotel, and drove for an hour in silence. Only for my buddy to say, "Oh my God, it's taking us in a circle all the way back to the place we just left." We put the truck in a straight line and hauled it out. To this day, it sticks with me. That was almost 20 years ago, and I wonder if we had been hoodwinked by some demon. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? That's fucking scary. I'd probably cry if that was me. Let me know your thoughts down below. Go ahead and like, follow, comment, and share. Love you as always. Bye.
Alright, check this out, y'all. Now, at first, I wasn't going to do this because I really don't like doing stories about, people, true stories about people I really don't know. But after reading paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, I decided that I'm going to do this story because after reading all of that, I definitely believe it. So, Janisha, I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. I'm going to do your story. So, Janisha not grew up. She said she lived in Calumet City like over 20 years. And it was her husband, and her children. Now, recently, about 5 years ago, her husband passed on, and it's just been her and her children. Now, she had a pretty decent job, and they had a home out there. She had a lot of things happen between last year and now, and, she ended up losing her home. So, her and her 4 children, was staying with a friend for a while. She was able to find another job. And it didn't pay as much as her last job, but it was okay. So she was able to save up a little money and she was able to try to find him a home. Now, first she was aiming towards Hammond, Indiana. Anybody know about Chicago, you know, Hammond, Indiana, Gary, Chicago, all of that stuff is like next door. Like it's really not far. So she decided that Indiana probably would be a little cheaper to live out there. So she was looking out there. She couldn't find none in Hammond, but she found a place in Gary that was very cheap. Now she went and checked it out. The place was a little rundown, need a little dusting and cleaning, you know, soap and water, but it was very affordable and there was enough space for her and her 4 children. So she decided to take the place. Her children didn't like the place at all, you know, kind of ran down. The neighborhoods kind of ran down, you know, so they really didn't like it. But you know, they had to, you know, get their own place. So finally it's move-in day. They move in. Now the first couple days, they're in there, they're unpacking, they're cleaning, you know, trying to get stuff together. You know, the landlord let her know, like, look, I got a guy that was staying on the first floor that was keeping people from breaking in, trashing the place. Every now and then you're going to hear him downstairs. They're going to be working. You're probably going to hear drills and saws and stuff like that because they're getting the place together so I can rent that out too. And he said, I actually got a tenant for it already. I just have to, you know, finish working on it. So she's like, okay. So as the day is going by, she's trying to get settled into her new place. She's going to work. She's coming home, you know, trying to get her children registered for schools out there and all of that. So it's kind of been like a crazy, like first week for her, you know, in her new place. So her and her children constantly having arguments about the place. They don't like the schools. They don't like where the store is at. They don't like this, and that. You know, you have children, are they going to complain when it's somewhere they don't like, and plus they're not around their friends no more, whatever. So she said she started to notice weird things happening at first. And the first weird thing that was happening, she said every morning for about 4 or 5 days straight, she would get up, you know, walk in the living room. That's where the front door was at. And the front door was like open, not wide open, but like cracked. Now she definitely got a 16-year-old son, and at first, the first couple days, she's going off on him. Are you sneaking out, puffing something? Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you going out the door? Because she don't think it's the other children. She know he's the oldest one in the house. But it's not him. You know, it's not him. He's not doing this. You know, she had to think about it. Like, they live in Gary. He's never even been in Gary, Indiana before like that. So what would he be sneaking out to do? So she noticed that. Then another thing she noticed, the first day she laid her cell phone and her keys down when she came in from work one day, and she got ready to go to the grocery store. When she got ready to look for her phone and her keys, she could not find them for about 30 minutes. And she ended up finding them in another spot in the house that she almost is positive, like 99.9% positive that she didn't put them there. But she thinking maybe one of her children or something moved them and not saying nothing, but she definitely don't think that's the case. Another thing is that one day she was sitting in her living room and she had the TV playing, but the TV was down on maybe like 20 because she was scrolling through her phone. Say all of a sudden her TV volume raised to like 60. It got very loud. You know, kids came out the room like, why you got the TV so loud? She said it went up by itself, whatever. Another incident, she said she heard her refrigerator slam one night. And her children know that like if it's 1, 2 in the morning, she don't want them up snacking. Look, you could just wait till the morning. She get up, she go in her kitchen, you know, the refrigerator's closed, whatever, but she go look in her kids' room. Everybody is asleep. Like she checked them, they sleep. Nobody had been woke. And she said that was weird to her. So she said she decided to ask the landlord, you know, had somebody passed on in the place before, and he didn't know. He didn't know. He said he had only had a property for about 3 or 4 years. So he really not sure of the history on the property. When he acquired the property, no one lived there. So, you know, she tried to ignore a lot of these things. She like, maybe it's just an old house. It could just be me. Maybe it's just a paranoia of us moving to a new town, new house. But what really, really, really got her, she wanted to do something nice for her children. And this was recent. Okay, this was like in the past month probably. She wanted to do something nice for her children. So she decided, she had saved a little money up. I'm going to take my children to Great America. So she took her children out to Great America. They went out there that day. They had a good time. She said, they went out there, they rode rides, had fun. She said they even left a little early, stopped and ate dinner out before they got home so she wouldn't have to prepare them nothing when she got home. When they were pulling up in front of their home, she said her children, they seen it like with their own two, everybody in the car seen it. Pulling up and she's parking and like that balcony back there. This is not the exact house, but it's made something like this. It was an older guy, a gentleman, she said, standing on her balcony. Now, at first she said her heart started pounding fast, like, oh my God, because she's heard stories about Gary, about break-ins and stuff like that. And her children, they got video games, TV, computers, iPad, they got a lot of expensive, nice things. And, she called the police. Now she called the police, her oldest son, like, mom, hurry, he's going in the house. So once she called, Gary PD, they came out there to check her home and they didn't find nothing. And they actually talked to the guy that the landlord, was, saying working at, cause he was actually downstairs at the time. And he told them like, he don't have a pass key to go up and he didn't hear any noises or nothing up there, So once Gary, PD left, she was talking to the guy off the first floor and she was apologizing to telling him she wasn't trying to get him in no trouble. And he told her, he said, "No, ma'am, I understood, but in your apartment, I've definitely experienced and, seen some strange things up there. I kind of like moved all the old furniture out of that apartment that was up there. And I definitely used to get a weary feeling. He told her he hired his nephew to help him clean it out, because he said usually, he do the clean outs and stuff himself if it ain't too bad. He said that one wasn't bad, but he said he hired his nephew to help clean the apartment out because he said he couldn't be in there alone. He said he was scared. He was actually scared. This is a grown man telling a female that he was actually scared to be in the apartment, by himself. And she said that gave her goosebumps. It made the hairs on her arm stand up for a grown man to tell her that he was scared to be in a place by himself. And here she is there staying with her and her 4 children. Follow, comment, subscribe for more stories. So after that incident and talking to the guy that worked for the landlord, she was kind of shook. And she didn't want to show to her kids that she was shook because, this is something crazy. So the next couple days have been like kind of smooth. They didn't hear nothing. They was kind of moving around the house kind of light. About that 4th night, her daughter and her youngest son came in the room. They was hysterical. They were crying. And she asked them what happened. They say they were laying in the bed and the door to the room like kind of crept open and a guy came floating in the room. Now she said she asked her children, like, what do you mean came floating in the room? They said there was a guy that was floating in a room like Superman. Now what made this so crazy, she said her oldest son said he was playing his game and he could have sworn like out of his peripheral he caught something floating past his room door. Now she want to talk to the landlord. Now she's asking the landlord, do he have any other property? Is there any place else they can go? But he don't have nothing else available. So what she's decided to do is start looking for other places around Gary because she see Gary is really affordable. She's been trying to do that. She really ain't had no luck. Now her son's birthday just had passed on June 19th. He wanted his cousins and, some friends that he had in Calumet City to come and spend a night and stay with him over to the house. He turned 17 years old. Of course, they probably didn't want to do that, but, he wanted his people out there. So, they came out there. They went out that day earlier, kicked it or whatever, and they spent the night out at the house with him. Now, the night they spent the night, They in her son room, and it's about 3 or 4 of them in there. She said they playing video games. They got their snacks. They really chilling. She said around about 2 in the morning, she heard beating and yelling from the room door. Say she hopped up out the bed, and she has a CCL. What that is. So she grabbed that because she hear her son, that's 17, just turned 17, him and his cousin, them in the room screaming. But when she got to the room, they wasn't screaming because something was wrong. They was screaming because they couldn't get out of the door. The room door wouldn't open. She told them to calm down. There was nobody holding the door on the other side. She's on the other side. And she was trying to push while they pulled. They couldn't get out the door. They even did it so hard that they broke the doorknob. So finally, around about 4 a.m., she said she's sitting on the floor. They all laughing and talking because everybody in the house is woke now because, of the yelling and stuff. So they all sit in the hallway. They laughing and they talking. Just out of nowhere, the door just pop open and just swing open. She said they all hopped up and everybody's staring at the door frame. Come on now. We've done beat, pulled, and tugged on this door and the door didn't open. So she say they all sat up that night laughing and talking in the living room. Her son bought his PlayStation in the living room, so they all kicked it up there for the rest of the night to about maybe 5, 6 in the morning, and they all fell asleep in the living room. She said she got up the next morning. She took her nephew and them home, his son, the son friends or whatever. Everything smooth. Come back home. She pull in front of her house. Her and her son, her kids getting out, they laughing, they talking. She said, her van door had got stuck or something like that. So her and her son, they was all out there for about maybe 20 minutes trying to get the van door to close. Once they get upstairs, going to their house, she said as she's coming up the stairs, you can hear footsteps like somebody was going up the stairs in front of her. Now, she say she stopped and her kids stopped because she's hearing this. They not hearing this. So when she stopped, she say her kid's not paying attention, but she could hear the soft footsteps going up to that door. So she say she get up to her house door, she unlocked the door and go in. She said it felt like a cold wind came in the house with her. Okay. And she say, she trying not to pay attention to it. She's really trying to keep calm and trying to figure out what she's going to do about staying here. So she say she went. She didn't want to scare her kids or say nothing to them. She went and sat on the couch. She said for some odd reason, all 4 of her children came in the living room and they sat down and they was looking really crazy. And she said, what's wrong, y'all? And she said they was saying Mom, some don't feel right. Some feel off and, we don't like it. So she ended up calling her friend. And this is the friend that she was staying with before they found the place. And she was asking her friend, telling her friend, basically, girl, I might have to come back to your house with my kids. And a friend was asking her, what's going on? And she started to explain to the friend, everything that's happening in the house. And a friend was like, well, you can come, but she got some other family members at her house that she helping out that's staying with her. So, now she really stuck in a rock and a hard place because, her mother, passed on years ago. She never really knew who her father was. She don't have that much family. That friend, she used to stay over at her house and stuff like that. And she say she don't really know what to do with her and her children, but those were all the incidents that she was having in this home now. I'm friends with her, TikTok, and other social medias and stuff like that. I'm gonna definitely keep y'all updated on what's going on when she let me know what's going on. But yeah, it kind of tripped me out. Like I said before, I was not gonna do this story, but what made me want to do it, first thing, this is something that's going on right now as we speak. This is recent. This woman and her children is going through this right now as I'm recording this video. So that's what made it so interesting for me. And I'm going to be praying for those people and hopefully they can find them a better situation. I'm out. Follow, comment, subscribe for more stories.
This girl posted about a glitch in the Matrix twice. If you haven't seen that video, check out my playlist or go to my profile. It is fascinating what happened to her. But then I clicked on the comments and there were more crazy stories. Like, this one is crazy. I went to a store. While walking in, a license plate on a car caught my eye because it had my 8-year-old son's birthday in it. We get inside, and the salesperson had my full attention immediately. I couldn't stop staring at him. After a couple minutes, I said, "I'm sorry I can't stop staring at you, but you look like my son grown up. But he's only 8 now." The guy laughed and said, "Is his name Nate?" "It is," I said. "Are you messing with me?" At that moment, another salesperson walks over, so I asked, "What's this guy's name?" He said, "Nate." I was blown away. I said, "The only way to confirm you're Nate in the future is if you have a birthmark here." And I point to the palm of my hand. The guy's face drops, and he slowly raises his hand to show the exact birthmark on his palm. And he says, "Mom?" And it gets even crazier. This person said, "That is so cool. Did you guys keep in contact?" She said, "No, I went back to the store to talk to him, and apparently Nate never worked there. When I went to show them his name as the salesperson on the receipt, it wasn't his name. The other employee that had come over kind of got involved in the sale, so his name was on the receipt. I went by the store for weeks, and he was never there." My sister-in-law took a video when she visited Mexico. She came home and showed it to me, and I was in the background, but I didn't go. Once I lost my glasses. They were gone for over a year. Then one day, me and my daughter were watching TV, and they just dropped to the floor between us out of nowhere. I went on a trip to London back in 2000. We all broke into groups and explored the city. When we got back, one of the parents asked why I didn't answer them earlier. I was confused. They said an entire group of them saw me walking by myself and yelled for me over and over, but I wouldn't answer them. I was with a group of friends on the other side of the city. What do you think about these glitches in the Matrix? Tell me in the comments. And also, if you had a glitch in the Matrix, do you ever see your doppelganger? Let me know. I want to hear about it.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. Today I'm going to be giving you ghost story number 9. This is something that has happened to me recently, so buckle up. It's going to be somewhat of a bumpy ride, nothing too crazy, but just something I wanted to share with you. So I have been acquiring haunted dolls slowly over the course of the last couple months. My first doll, her name is Ruth, and she's very sweet, very gentle. I believe she died from an illness. I'm not really sure what it was, but that's something I want to do a little bit more digging into. My second doll I acquired, her name is Jessica, and she's very spicy, but Jessica had a very hard life. She was kept up in an attic. I believe it was a disappointments room, and I believe it is because she had a child out of wedlock, so her family kept her up there, took the child away from her, and she ultimately ended up passing away somehow. I don't know if she unalived herself or if somebody murdered her, but she had a very hard life. So now in death, she is very opinionated because I don't feel like she was able to have that. Third doll I just got recently. Her name is Lisa. She's very sweet. I don't really know how she passed away yet, but I like her a lot. She's very gentle, has a very sweet disposition, and she told me that she is primarily in heaven and then just kind of comes back and forth. So she just kind of pops in and out of her vessel. I don't know why some spirits choose to do that, but if they have the will and the opportunity and the power to do that, by all means, have at it, babes. So the night I brought Lisa home, we had a really bad thunderstorm. So lots of thunder, lots of lightning. And I feel like whenever storms are around, it charges the air and it gives spirits a little bit more energy. And I think she was just really excited to come home. So I was just asking questions, using my pendulum, getting to know her a little bit, used my little ghost tube app, and then just kind of went on about my night. I was like, you know what, you guys can just settle in together down here, get to know each other, and I'll come check on you tomorrow or later, essentially. And that night, my husband and I were watching TV, and yes, it was the 4th of July. Yes, there were fireworks, but the lights in our kitchen and our living room shut off and then turned back on. But our TV never shut off. There was never that power surge sound. No one else in the neighborhood that I could see lost any power. There wasn't a boom as if someone hit a generator. So don't know what that was. And my husband was like, what was that? He immediately got freaked out. And I said, maybe it was Lisa. And he's like, take her back. And I said, no, I love her. Like, we're not taking her back. And then the next day, my friend Marin came over. And she and I do tarot readings for each other, or like energy work trading for each other. And it's just something that she and I do. And I love her very dearly. Hold on, I'm going to pull forward. Not me feeling like someone was watching me, and I look over and there's a fucking fly. Ugh. I hate flies. They're disgusting. They're like little demons. Anyway, so she and I are doing energy work, and I have this little LED candle that I have next to my dolls, and I never have issues with them dimming or being bright. They're just kind of have their like consistent little flicker. And I had it turned on while we were doing energy work with each other. And she's like, I feel like someone else is trying to chime in here. And I said, I think it's my dolls. And we look over, and my candle that I have over there is going whoop, like shutting off and turning back on, and shutting off and turning back on. And we would ask specific questions, and it would shut off and turn back on. I am going to probably try to record this sometime in the future, just because I want to show you guys and because it just tickles me. But I just wanted to share that little tidbit from my life. And I love my dolls. I love my haunted objects. I love spirits. And I just feel like it is so important for us to honor and remember people who have passed on. I don't know. It's just something I've always done. So anyway, have a fantastic, amazing, wonderful Friday. And I'll catch you all on the flip side.
This is going to be an hour-long video about Bigfoot. Okay, so buckle up, get comfortable, get ready. Now, if you want to listen to this without watching it, go to Spotify or Apple Podcast. It's called Matt from Nomads. The link is in the comments. So let's get right into Bigfoot, okay? The biggest question I always get is, why haven't we found him? I think we have many times over. I think so many people have seen the truth, have provided the facts about Bigfoot, and science and the government will want to hide it. The reason why is I think it would cause a lot of conflict with religion and cultural beliefs. So a lot of people already have a hard time accepting that 21 other human species have walked this earth. I grew up in church, okay, guys? I also have an open mind. And I think the Bible is very vague on a lot of stuff. And a lot of people have a hard time getting past what I'm about to say. Because in the Bible it says that God created us. He is not specific when he says us. So there's been 21 humanoid species. That's an irrefutable fact of science that they have discovered, that they have claimed to discover. I honestly think there's more. Around 6 of them, and up to 9 of them, existed at the same time Neanderthals did. In fact, what we are today is a mix of Homo sapien and Neanderthal. There is not a single person on this planet that does not have at least a tiny, 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 tiny bit of Neanderthal DNA in them. Science has yet to find anybody with less than 0.2% Neanderthal DNA. Some people have a whopping 20% Neanderthal in their DNA still today. And Neanderthals haven't existed for a long time. And we still have people walking around that are 20% Neanderthal. That means that their great-grandparents were damn near straight up Neanderthal. It's not that far back in our future when you think about it. So I think that they don't want to say, like, hey, there is still at least one humanoid creature walking around on this earth. And that's what I have a hard time accepting from people, is they say, oh, Bigfoot can't be real. Why not? We had all these other humanoid species out there. What if this is just another one? Now, if you don't like my theory on Bigfoot, guys, this video is going to cover like 7 different theories on Bigfoot. And I'm not going to tell you which one that I believe in. But these are all going to cover the different aspects of it, all the way from feral people, all the way to Native American beliefs, it being a spiritual creature, not a real physical creature. Maybe that's why we don't find bodies. I'm going to cover all of the aspects of it, all the way down to it just being a big old great ape, which is not a monkey. Apes and monkeys are not the same. So, after knowing that we have all these different humanoid species that have existed on this earth, some were as short as about 3.5 to 4 foot tall. So, like literally the hobbits from Middle Earth. Some were the size that we are now. We're actually about the biggest species that ever existed. Now, Neanderthals had much thicker bones than us. They were a lot stronger than us, pound for pound. We were a lot smarter. That's the reason why we're believed to be the only one left now, is because we kind of phased everything else out because we were just smarter than everybody. and we could use tools better than everybody else can. But we were not the only humanoid species to be able to speak or to use tools. So I just want to get that out of the way now. A lot of people say that, oh, the other humanoid species don't count because they're really closer to apes. Nope, they could use tools. They could talk. Like, it's, in fact, some inventions that we have today, such as the wheel, they think the Neanderthals were the ones that actually came up with it. So go ahead and get that out of your head. So now, talking about people and humanoid species, my first theory we're going to cover is that Bigfoot is actually just a feral human. Now, there is a ton of different accounts you can look up of like retired park rangers, current park rangers that want to stay anonymous because they're afraid they're going to lose their job. People that have, been avid hikers on the, the Appalachian Mountains and the Rocky Mountains that say that Bigfoot is not a ape creature, that he is a feral human. And the reason why he is so hairy is because he's feral. A lot of people say, well, you couldn't, evolve and change this quickly. Yeah, you can. Like, there has been so many subcultures of people that we have found in this world that have had crazy abnormalities that look wildly different than the rest of humankind. Like, look at the Kentucky Blue people, where it was essentially like a 1 in a million chance, or 1 in 10 million chance, that two people that carry the same rare blood disorder that turns your skin a slight shade of blue would meet up and marry each other. And then so their kids were literally blue like Smurfs. Then their children kept being blue because then they started, there's a lot of inbred and all that stuff going on there. That's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. But that's just to prove that in recent history, like some of them are still alive, that we have seen subcultures of humans that can look wildly different than the rest of us. Just because of genetic freak accidents or going feral. Going feral is a real thing. If you take a domestic hog, you take your pink little cute cartoon pigs and you release them into the wild, within literally just a few months, they can undergo a transformation where you would not recognize that pig anymore, and they would be what you would know as a wild hog. They're way more aggressive. They have way more hair. Their hair is way longer. Their tusks get bigger. Their snouts actually change disposition. Like, their bone structure changes. Their bone structure changes. Now, why does this happen? A lot of it is to believe that it is their diet. It's not because there's not somebody petting them and feeding them and being all nice to them every day. It's because their diet changes to have a lot more creatine and a lot more protein. On farms, they tend to get almost nothing but grains and like fruits and vegetables and table scraps, where in the wild, they're eating a lot of raw insects. They're eating a lot of small rodents. They're eating anything they can get their hands on. And this increase in protein and creatine will change them drastically. So now when we cook our foods, we cook a lot of that creatine and taurine out of the foods. If you have not looked up like the whole predator theory on why like lions and bears and all these other big predator creatures can be so aggressive and they're so known to attack if you mess with them, is because of that taurine and creatine that's in their diet and it's necessary for them. So if you were to take a human and put them out in the wild and started making them only eat these kind of things, obviously their genetic disposition is going to change because they're getting foods that aren't as cooked. They're not as processed. They're a lot more raw. There's nothing wrong with that if people want to do raw diets, but when you're doing it day after day, generation after generation, it's going to have some effects. People will jump to, well, why weren't people in the Middle Ages, feral? If you ever look at people that were in the Middle Ages, they were also wildly different than us, behavior-wise, aggression-wise. People were way more violent back a long time ago. So, that's not a huge jump there. The feral people thing that park rangers have described is these people that are so disconnected from reality of, modern life that they don't have the rules, they don't have the morals that you do. To them, if they killed you in the woods, that's not religiously wrong because they don't know religion. It's not morally wrong because they don't have a code to live by. There's no law to answer to. They're doing it for survival or to, this might be gruesome, but for meat. Kind of like when you watch the movie Hills Have Eyes and stuff. Or The Descent. Those are all examples of movies with feral people. But the Bigfoot theory on the feral people is, to me, a scarier. Because these park rangers talk about, they know of, there's some park rangers in the Smoky Mountains and Rocky Mountains that know of pockets of feral people. There's technically legally nothing that you can really do. It's not illegal to go live in the national parks in a tent. There's been people that have done it for years and years and years. While some areas it might be considered illegal, as long as you're not really hurting anybody and you're just camping out there, there's been plenty of instances of people that have just gone and lived for years in the national parks by choice. So this is not, an abnormal thing to do. for a lot of people. Now, the way you get foods can kind of be questionable because, you get into hunting permits and fishing permits. But feral people, once again, they don't have the same law to abide by and answer by. They're living on a whole different thing. No one's really checking your fishing permits when you're in the middle of nowhere. These park rangers have described finding cabins with personal belongings, with canned foods that have obviously been stolen from places. And they all talk about how these feral people are really good at not being seen, like scarily good at not being seen. So one park ranger's talked about how he would purposely try to find this feral camp all the time to try to catch the people because they were obviously stealing. And he knew where their area was at. And he said every time I would go there, I tried night vision cameras, I tried thermals. It was like they could hear me miles away and they would just know that I was coming. And once you get in tune with nature like that, especially if they've been living out there for generations, I'm sure that their senses are heightened, their senses are better. We have the ability to use senses that we don't even realize that we have. There's a group of islanders off the, the specific islands out there, off the coast like Indonesia, that at will, can dilate their pupils no matter what lighting they're in. That's insane. They can damn near see in the dark perfectly fine, and they can swim underwater for nearly 20 minutes. That is superhuman. Like, nearly 20 minutes they can be underwater, and they can dilate their pupils to see better underwater. That doesn't sound real. That sounds like science fiction, but I promise you it's real. Just go ahead and look that up. If you question me on any part of this video, before you start arguing with me, go look it up and then come back. Okay? So there's all kinds of adaptations that we're not even really aware of that the human body can gain that I'm sure at one point we had. Just like we know that babies used to start walking at a much earlier age, but because over generations and generations and generations, we've babied them and carried them and, kind of ooh and all them. Where babies naturally now don't start walking until much older. But back when there was cavemen and stuff, they would estimate that the babies would have to start walking within 3 to 5 months because they literally could not be able to live otherwise because the other people couldn't have carried them around all day. So we know that our bodies are wildly different than they would be if they were truly wild. Now, this guy was talking about how he would catch glimpses of them sometimes, and their ability to scale trees was, once again, supernatural. He was like, or what we would assume would be supernatural. He would talk about how they would scale trees just like monkeys you would see on TV, how quick they were, how fast they were, how silent they were. He talked about him being followed multiple times and, kind of catching them peeking at him from behind trees. And it was one of the eeriest things he could talk about because just like a deer, they essentially made no noise. It was like they just were ghosts in the woods, which there's a book you can actually read called Ghost in the Woods that is about feral people and about people that live off the grid. Anyhow, get back on topic here. There's been multiple accounts of people that have supposedly been taken by feral people, like in the last 40, 50 years. There's a lot of cases, but we're going to talk about 3 in specific. So the Dennis Martin case, I did a whole deep dive video on the Dennis Martin case. I'm just going to briefly touch on it here. This goes into the Missing 411 documentaries. If you've not watched Missing 411 with David Pilatus, if you have not watched the Missing 411 with David Pilatus, I urge you to do so. So the Missing 411 series is about people that go missing under weird circumstances. It's not about people that go missing in the national parks. It's about people that go missing in the national parks with weird circumstances because there's a huge difference there. We're talking about this category of disappearances fall upon people that the dogs can't find their scents. They disappear from an area that shouldn't have been where they disappeared at. They disappeared when they were with a group and they stepped away from the group for just a second. They disappeared and their footprints just vanished. Like they just got sucked into the air or went into a portal of some kind. There's the Missing 411 is the really weird ones. Okay. Sometimes in the Missing 411 cases, the people are found and they're found in ways that they shouldn't have been found in, like kids that were up a cliff that they would have had to mountain climb to get up there. Or, there was one story of a boy that was found hung up in a tree and they didn't think a mountain lion could have done it because there wasn't any claw marks or bite marks on his body. So there's no way for a mountain lion to take somebody up a tree without doing that. Even though they do take their prey into the tree, it would have left some kind of mark on this boy and he didn't have a mark on him. Some of these are deceased. Some of them are alive. The ones that get found alive have no recollection of what happened while they were missing. Like to them, they were only gone for a few hours, but it had actually been days. Now there's medical reasons for that too, is because when people go under, shock and stress, they tend to feel like time moves extraordinarily fast. But anyhow, getting back on Dennis Martin. So Dennis Martin was a 6-year-old boy in the Great Smoky Mountains. This was right on the Tennessee-North Carolina border. To this day, there's never been a trace of Dennis Martin found, and it's been nearly 60 years. His whole family was there. They were playing a game of hide and go seek with all their cousins and their other family that was there. The dad was aware of how young Dennis Martin was and did not want to leave him unattended and not watch him. So the dad was actually watching him while they were playing hide and go seek so he could see where he hid. Now, this was a populated campground. I don't want you guys to think they were in the middle of nowhere. There was at least 15 to 20 people in the very, near vicinity. So Dennis Martin, being 6 years old, goes and ducks behind a tree. His dad watches him duck behind the tree, and he can clearly see both sides of this tree. The other boys are playing hide and go seek, and one of the boys looks behind the tree that Dennis Martin had hid behind, and he didn't say, "Oh, I found somebody." He just keeps going, and the dad was like, "That's weird. He should have found Dennis." So it had been roughly, I think they said around 6 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes. The dad goes behind and peeks around the tree that Dennis Martin had been hiding behind, and his son was not there. Now, this was not a really thick area for about 100 feet in any direction, so he couldn't have just slipped into a bush that was next to the tree. They got park rangers involved immediately. It was one of the quickest acting cases, and it was a humongous search party. The reason why I'm bringing Bigfoot into this is because the only police note that they had that was a lead was some witness called in roughly 20 to 30 minutes after Dennis Martin would have been gone and vanished, about 2 miles away from where he vanished at, and they said that it looked like a big, hairy person was carrying a sack of clothes over its shoulder. The sack of clothes is believed to be Dennis Martin. The hairy thing could have been a really hairy person. It could have been a feral person. It could have been a Bigfoot. However you want to classify this, that is the legitimate only police clue that was ever included on this case. And we have nothing else. Nothing. People say that it could have been an abductor, which it could have been. People say it could have been a bear. I don't think so. There was somebody would have saw a bear come into the camp. A bear wouldn't have came that close to that many people in the middle of the daylight making that noise. So a lot of people have believed what happened is the tree that he was hiding under did have branches right up above him. A lot of people have speculated that maybe this feral person or this Bigfoot creature reached down from the tree limbs on the opposite side of the tree where the dad could not see and yanked him up into the trees and then ran off through like jumping tree to tree, and then came down later. And that would have been why the dogs couldn't have picked up his scent, because he didn't touch the ground for a while. Getting into that about being snatched up into the trees, you remember the story I just told a minute ago about the boy found up in the tree. There is another woman that disappeared without any trace of what happened to her, but she was a little bit older. She was 18, and she was hiking alone. Her name was Paula Jean Weldon. I'm reading off my notes here. Paula Jean Weldon was 18 years old. And what happened to her is you can see her footprints walking, and she was described as having a backpack and a big jug of water, and she vanished. Like, her footprints just stop. It stops right underneath the pine thicket, and a lot of people have estimated and, kind of came to the conclusion that something would have had to snatch her up into those trees. If you want to go down the portal theory, that's a different video for a different day. I've done one over it before. Portal theories is pretty neat. I'm going to just briefly talk about it. It's about how you might literally walk through a different dimension. People automatically want to discredit portals. NASA literally confirms that portals are real. They just say that they happen in outer space. The fact that they're real and we don't really know anything about them tells me all I need to know that it could possibly happen. Maybe that's why the Bermuda Triangle exists. Maybe that's why all these different things exist and people go missing in random places. Maybe that's why we have national parks where we have national parks. This is called containment theory. So containment theory is the belief that the national parks are where they are because we have known that anomalies or portals, etc., happen in those areas. And they're too big of an area to block off forever from everyone. So they limit the access to them by making it where you can't build towns or cities there, and there's just hiking trails there. And it's an accepted risk that a few people might go missing or a few people might get taken by a creature. That's called containment theory. Because when you think about it, all of North America was a national park at some time. So why did we section off certain areas? There's plenty of hills and mountain ranges that are not national parks or state parks. So why are certain ones those areas? And that's containment theory that talks about portals, that talks about deals with vampires and werewolves and that being their hunting grounds. Maybe it's a Bigfoot refugee camp. There's a lot of reasons why a lot of people think that there's national park boundaries where they are. If you want to get more spooked, go look at the no light zones where even emergency crews have to get permission to go in and try to rescue you because there's not supposed to be machinery or lights in those areas. What are they trying not to disturb so badly that even a rescue crew has to get permission to go in to save you? It's kind of weird when you think about it. Now, sorry, we're going to get back on track here on the missing people in the 411. This is the last case I'm going to talk about, then we're going to move on to a new subject, okay? And this one's the one I want to talk about because it's what could happen when you go looking for things that don't want to be found. This is the case of Teresa Ann Beer. That's B-I-E-R, if anybody wants to look that up. Teresa Ann Beer. She was 22 years old. She was actually on a Bigfoot tracking expedition with a group of people. On this expedition that was in Yosemite National Park, which is probably the most common park for people to go missing in, and they were out there for a few days, and the one of the guides that was on this expedition, left the group to go back to the ranger station to report that they could not find Teresa because they saw Teresa get taken by what they could only describe as a Bigfoot. Park rangers were quick to jump that it was a grizzly bear dragging her away, and they were very adamant. No, it was walking upright, carrying her over her shoulder, and she seemed to be unconscious. What do you do with that? Did a group of people decide to murder her and hide her, and that was their alibi? Why would a group of strangers decide to murder this lady and then say a Bigfoot did it? Maybe something wrong happened on the guide, and they were responsible for her and didn't want to be sued, so they hid her. But why would the other people on the expedition also go along with it? It doesn't make a lot of sense when you start looking at it in that aspect. They were deep, deep, deep in Yosemite National Park, and they actually could not find the exact location again when they were trying to tell the park rangers where it happened. Go down that rabbit hole if you want to. A lot of people are conflicted on if this is a true crime case or not. But witnesses said that they saw her get taken by a Bigfoot. There you go. Now, what strikes me about that is how they saw it happen. No one reports hearing her screaming or fighting or kicking. It was just like, bam, it took her. So did it knock her out? Did it break her neck immediately? I don't know. Talking about breaking its neck immediately, there is a wild report you can look at where, this is in the Great Smoky Mountains, where a family that lived in the middle of nowhere, kind of like the Kentucky Blue people we talked about, they lived way off the grid and they had nothing to do with civilization. These people didn't even have driver's license. They just drove where they wanted to, did what they wanted to, and did not believe in any kind of government, contact. So they lived out in the woods. They hunted for all their own food. And they talked about how they kind of lived alongside of a Bigfoot family. Not where they'd see them every day and talk to them or anything. It's just they would see them every few months. And it was kind of an understood thing from both parties. Hey, you don't mess with me, I won't mess with you. Don't mess with my area, I won't mess with your farm. And they'd go about their ways. This sounds crazy at first. But these people, the way they talked about it just felt like they were telling the truth. Yeah, they obviously looked crazy. But the way they discussed its hunting habits, and these people had no contact with civilization, describes how scientists think that Neanderthals hunted as well. They talked about how it was so quiet. Now, remember what I said about the park ranger, saying it was like a ghost. It was so quiet that it could on foot sneak up on deer, which can see almost 360 degrees around them. It also, they described how bad of an odor it had. To me, why wouldn't the deer smell it, Or maybe, if they're living out there in the woods, the deer smell it so often that it's just another smell in the woods. Who knows? But anyhow, they said they would witness it would sneak up behind deer and stick one leg underneath its torso, one arm underneath its torso and the other arm in front of its neck. And when the deer would go to run, they would grab its back legs and then they would snap its neck backwards and kill it almost instantly. They were apparently so strong that they could just grab it by the hide and rip the hide right off of it immediately. That's weird. Okay. Now that strength, we're going to talk about the Valley of the Headless Men. I don't know if you guys have ever gone down this one, but the Valley of the Headless Men is a area, I believe in Canada or the very, very northern part of North America. It's right on the border there. Anyhow, the Valley of the Headless Men is supposedly where a lot of gold is, but no one has successfully been able to extract gold from there. There's been like 6 decapitated bodies found, and no one's ever found their heads. Like, that's weird. Like, no animal would do that. A wolf wouldn't do that. A bear wouldn't do that. A mountain lion wouldn't do that. Their heads are just ripped off. And it's almost like a territorial thing. People, kind of believe and speculate there on it. It's like, hey, don't come in my cave, because they're trying to go in these caves and these rivers and mine this gold. And over the past, 50 or 60 years, multiple people have disappeared and never been found. But 6 bodies on 6 different occasions have been found with their heads removed, all within a couple miles of each other. That hasn't happened anywhere else in the world, so that's how I know it's not an animal. And 2, I'm an animal expert. It's what I do for a living. Ain't no animal eating nothing but the head, like the least meaty part of the body, the most bony part of the body. They're not eating the head. They might eat the skin, like the noses and the ears and stuff. They're not going to eat the whole head and not the torso. Most, your wolves, your bears, your mountain lions, they're going right for the torso every time. They're going right for that soft belly where there's no bones in the way, and they're going to hollow you out. That's what they're mostly going to do. Now, many of you that have been watching my page for a while know that my wife is Native American. She belongs to the Chickasaw tribe, even though she's also part Choctaw. And we're going to get to the Choctaw Indians in just a minute with Bigfoot. We've done a video on it before, but we're going to talk about a lot of Native American beliefs with Bigfoot. Depending on the tribe, they have very different beliefs in Bigfoot. Some, he's like the boogeyman, which would be like the Choctaw. And then some, he is a nature spirit that protects the forest. There's many different accounts in the way this goes. A lot of the tribes do not believe that he is a flesh and bone creature. They think that he can be, but they also think that he can plane walk, which is walking between planes of existence and, the different realms of existence, and, like the planes of light versus the physical realm. There's a whole lot of stuff you can look into with that. And that would also describe the reason why maybe people don't find Bigfoot bodies a lot. Is because they can phase in and out of what we would think is existence. I think that's also what, might be why, everybody always says and jokes, why is every picture of Bigfoot blurry? He might just be blurry. That might be his physical trait of appearance. It's just being kind of blurry, especially if he's phasing in and out. Or people might be only getting a photo once he's already knows that they're there and he's phasing out and they're getting a picture of him being blurry. We're going to talk about a different theory in a minute that's not phasing out of existence, but phasing out of what we can see. We'll get there in a second. But what I want to talk about right now is the Native American beliefs that have gone along with it. So a lot of people in Native American beliefs have described Bigfoots as what we would call giants almost. So the Choctaw actually had what was called the Bigfoot War in 1855. This is a documented event within the Choctaw tribe. You can read about it online if you want to. There's a lot of, there's books been written about it. There's things you can see. And this is what bothers me, is mainstream science and archaeologists go, well, they didn't mean that. And that always bothers me, because we'll take a civilization's history. We'll look at what they wrote down as their history, and we pick and choose on what we want to believe is real. So they'll say, oh, they had a war with these Native American tribes over here. Why is that real, but their war with Bigfoot's not? Maybe they made that up about that tribe over there. Maybe they made that story up to scare other tribes, right? And they go, no, we got proof and we got documentation of it. Okay, they supposedly had proof of the Bigfoot War. They supposedly had documentation of the Bigfoot War. And what happened was, okay, so they were on the Trail of Tears. They were getting, moved from the east to what is now Oklahoma. I believe the Bigfoot War happened in southeastern Oklahoma. But anyhow, what they described as happening is these Bigfoot creatures were taking their children in the middle of the night. They would just get kidnapped and eaten, essentially. And they were living in this cave area. And it was getting to the point where, as they were on the Trail of Tears and they were keeping moving, these Bigfoots would find new caves and they would just kind of camp out near where this tribe was. And they just kept taking them just one by one. And eventually the tribe got its best warriors and they hunted these creatures down. Not just one, but multiple of these creatures down. And they cornered them in a cave and lit the inside of the cave on fire. They put some kind of accelerant in there, like a bunch of grasses and stuff. And they kind of burned the whole entrance of this, where the cave would have been full of smoke and would suffocate anything that was in there. And supposedly a few of the creatures escaped. So we read this story and archaeologists go, that was just some parable. That was just some way to scare the kids to not leave the camp and to stay next to the tribe and not leave and go on your own. That's just a way to scare the kids. Why? They didn't say that. They documented their whole Trail of Tears. They documented when it happened, how bad the people were to them. They documented when sickness and illness would happen. They documented Bigfoot war. They documented where they landed at. And for whatever reason, out of that whole Trail of Tears, we just take that story and go, and just throw it away. And don't honor anything that they said about it. That does not sit okay with me. And we see this all throughout history. We see civilizations talk about Atlantis, and they'll go, yeah, we traded with Portugal. We traded with Italy. We traded with Atlantis. And historians will go, oh, you traded with Atlantis? And they just pick that part out of the story and then throw it away because it doesn't fit a narrative that they're on, or they can't explain it. And no, la-di-da, holier-than-thou scientist wants to say, well, we can't explain that. They will always want to have the answers, because if they don't have the answers, they don't have a job, right? They want to be the most credible scientists out there. They want to be the most successful scientists out there. Well, to be the most successful scientist, you have to have the most answers. You have to have the most explanations. You have to have the most debunked theories. So when there's a lot of question marks, they throw them out. Okay, you got to understand that when you're looking at history, you are also looking at it someone's job to answer these questions. So I think all of us have worked a job, and we get asked by a customer, and we don't want to say, I don't know, because then the customer's going to say, well, go find out. So what you do is you just make something up. I think we've all done that at any job ever. I think our kids have always asked us questions that we didn't know the answer to. Like, why is the sky blue? And you're like, oh, it reflects off the ocean, which is not true. And we just make something up. I think that has happened time and time and time and time again throughout history, to at some point it became an accepted truth. Because what happens when your grandpappy tells you something? You take it as a fact, and then you tell your grandchildren something, and they take it as a fact. And then before long, it's just facts. When grandpappy was hiring a kite and was never telling any facts in the first place. Like, I know that's a joke and that's supposed to be funny, but how many times do we do this? For example, a lot of people make shortbread cake in the oven. When they make it, they cut it in half and they put it in the oven. They put one in each pan. Why do you do that? The answer is because a long time ago, ovens were too small to fit the whole cake in one pan. So they would divide the cake in half and put one on the top rack and one on the bottom rack. Still to this day, our ovens are damn sure wide enough to cook those cakes in one rack, but people still cut the cake in half because somebody did that a long time ago. I think science and history works that same way, is that we got an answer so long ago that we're afraid to ever change that answer. I'm going to talk about two more things about why we might not find Bigfoot very often. So one of the reasons why we might not find them is many great apes, like gorillas. Like, do you know how recently gorillas were discovered? Gorillas were discovered scientifically barely over 100 years ago. Barely over 100 years ago, a gorilla that you can go to any zoo and see, we did not scientifically know existed. Barely 100 years ago. My great-grandmother is still alive. She's 103 years old. And her parents were the first generation to know that gorillas for sure existed. My great-great-grandparents were the first generation to know that as a fact. That is so strange when you think about it. There's a reason why King Kong was such a popular movie when it came out, like in the 19-teens or whatever. Because gorillas just got discovered officially like 20 years before that. And a lot of people hadn't even seen a photograph of what a gorilla looked like. So when they went and watched King Kong, they were like, my God, this guy's huge. Are gorillas really that big? Because people hadn't seen gorillas yet. Like, even though they knew they existed now, no one really seen them yet. Because photographs and videos weren't like the same as what they are now. Like, now if a new animal gets discovered, everybody in the world can see it in 30 seconds. Back then it took a while. So still, by the 1930s and 40s, a lot of people still had never seen a gorilla. That's weird. That is very strange. Kangaroos weren't officially discovered until the 1700s. Kangaroos. People have been walking on this planet for tens of thousands of years. Science didn't officially accept that kangaroos were around until the 1700s. Now, the people that lived in Australia, like the Aborigines, they were like, yeah, they've been here. Same thing, when they found gorillas and stuff, people that were living in those areas were like, yeah, we've known about them the whole time. People that live in the foothills of Appalachia, like that family I was telling you a minute ago, might be the equivalent to those Aborigines or those people that were living around the gorillas, saying like, yeah, we've been telling people for a long time and they just call us crazy. Just like the first depiction of kangaroos described them as monsters. There was an explorer in the 1700s that said they were human-sized monsters that ate things with their belly because they saw them at a distance with binoculars, saw their babies jumping into their pouch, and thought they were eating things with their belly because marsupials exist almost nowhere else in the world. North America has one marsupial, and it's a possum. Europe, I think they have possums. I'm not even sure. They might not have any marsupials at all. So marsupials are an incredibly rare species of creature, and they were described as eating things with their belly. That's how dumb we were just a few hundred years ago. That's why I always get so frustrated when people say that, like, oh, it couldn't exist, or oh, if it did exist, it was a orang pendek and it existed tens of thousands of years ago. Okay, we just found a fish off the coast of Africa like 50 years ago that science had swore up and down had been extinct for 20,000 years. Giant squids were not officially discovered until after the movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Let that sink in. We made a monster movie that was put out as fiction that turned out to be non-fiction. We made the movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea before anybody had seen a living giant squid. Yet we still think that there's big giant creatures we would have had to discover them all by now. No, the hell we wouldn't. So the last thing is the Glimmerman theory. So if you don't know what Glimmerman theory is, think about like the Invisible Man. Think about the movie Predator. You know the movie Predator, he can cloak himself and turn invisible. There are so many reports of the Glimmerman theory, it is wild. There's one famous one about a female that was deer hunting and could have sworn that she saw a Glimmerman. So Glimmerman is essentially this phenomenon where people say that they can see the silhouette of a humanoid person, creature, but it's like the light is distorted, where you can tell something's there, but you can't see what it is. Like a cloaked camouflage, just like the Predator movie that I described. And you'll see the branches moving around it, and it's just like it's taking up physical space. Some people report being stalked by these things or followed. Some people report seeing them by their house all the time. There's a lot of theories that maybe this is a military cloaking device that we're testing out. There's a lot of theories that people are just crazy. And then there's a lot of theories that this is what we talked about earlier when we talked about Bigfoot walking between planes of existence and planes of light. We already know that there's light waves that we cannot see. Most animals can see many more lights than we can. In fact, foxes can actually see magnetic waves. If y'all didn't know that, foxes actually hunt using magnetic waves and frequencies that we can't even see. Now, they can't just sense them. They can physically see like a line in the air of a magnetic wave. That's pretty wild. That's what I don't know if you know this or not, but foxes always know where magnetic north is because they can physically see it. That is so strange. It's also true. It's pretty wild. Foxes' eyesight improve when they face magnetic north. So they almost always attack creatures from magnetic south, facing north. You're going to learn a lot of strange facts today. So we know that there's a lot of things with light waves and planes that we can't fully comprehend and understand. So why would it be out of the realm of thinking that there's creatures out there that might be able to tap into those things and camouflage themselves with those light waves? This is going to get into a weird theory about the red light lenses of Vietnam. So if you didn't know, before night vision goggles were green, they were actually red. And they stopped using them very quickly because people that were using the red light night vision goggles were reporting seeing demons. They were reporting seeing monsters. They reported that these things acted like they couldn't see them, but once they realized they were being looked at by these people wearing these goggles, they would come after the people with the goggles. There's tons of documented reports of guys wearing night vision goggles and opening fire and shooting at these things. And they're not hitting them because they're not on the same plane of existence we are, but for whatever reason, these red wave frequencies goggles could see them. And that is, I swear to God, that is the legitimate reason, if you look it up, why they use green night vision goggles now. They say they're more efficient and everything, but look up the reports of people seeing literal spirits, demons, ghosts, whatever you want to call them. You know, and maybe that at the end of the day, that's what a ghost is. It's just a flicker of this light wave dimension. But anyhow, getting back on topic here, the whole Glimmerman thing is a really wild theory that you can go down. And that might have been what the Vietnam people with the red light lenses were seeing, was these things that people would describe as the Glimmerman, but these goggles were letting them, see them. The last thing I'm going to discuss today on this Bigfoot theory is the possibility that they are pets, like literally like Chewbacca from Star Wars. This is going to sound goofy at first, but just hear me out. Pop culture tells us a lot of truth right in our face without coming out and saying it's the truth. So we all have seen Han Solo with Chewbacca and the Millennium Falcon. This is a weird little, synchronicity here. Any time that there is a spike in Bigfoot sightings, there is also a spike in UFO sightings in the same area. And a lot of Bigfoot researchers are now jokingly saying it, but starting to also kind of believe it. If UFOs are real and they have pets, just like how when you stop at a truck stop and you let your dog out to pee, there is a theory out there that when you see a Bigfoot in the woods, it's because a UFO was literally letting it out to stretch its legs or to use the bathroom or to gather resources, whatever their plan is to use them. Maybe they're the scouts for, whatever they're doing. Who knows? But there is a hand-in-hand every single time without fail. If there's a spike in Bigfoot sightings, there's also a spike in UFO sightings. If there's a spike in UFO sightings, there's a spike in Bigfoot sightings. Every single time in the same areas. It is really eerie when you look at those connections and speculate, are those the UFOs themselves? Are they letting themselves out? Are they taking a walk? Are they going on a hike? Are they sightseeing? Or is it their pets? Maybe they're for protection. A lot of people think that UFOs, if they came here, would be a lot physically weaker than us because gravity on most planets that we can see, based upon where it is in conjunction with its star, would have less gravity, which would mean they wouldn't build muscle mass like we would, so they might be a lot physically weaker than us, so they've got some other species that would do their physical bidding. So yeah, that's another little fact for you. Supposedly, if there was an alien invasion, they would have to use weapons because they could not throw hands like we could. So that's kind of like, if you ever watched Superman or read the comics of Superman, that's technically why Superman is so strong on Earth. If Superman goes back to his home planet, he's actually just like a normal person. He's so strong on Earth because the gravitational pressure on his planet is so incredibly enormous that compared to our planet, it's like he can move like that because his body was made to withstand all that gravitational force. Also, he gets like power from the sun or something, whatever. But Dragon Ball Z. Okay, here you go. If you ever watch Dragon Ball Z, that's why Saiyans are so much stronger on Earth than they would be anywhere else because the gravitational force on Earth is less. So they're stronger. I love comic books and anime. So one of these videos would be incomplete if I don't go on my anime tangents. So are Bigfoot's pets? Who knows? Are Bigfoot's blurry people? Are they great apes? Are they another humanoid species that science doesn't want to admit exist alongside of us current day? Is there something more to this? Are they nature spirits? We don't know, and I do not think we'll ever know, because I think that it has been confirmed by the powers that be that it is a sealed, locked-up case forever. Or maybe there's nothing to it at all. Maybe they're just feral people that are a little crazy. I appreciate you guys watching this. If you're not already watching this on the podcast, it's called Matt from Nomads on Apple and Spotify. It's called Nomads Animal Reserve on YouTube. For those of you watching the podcast, go follow her on our Facebook. It's Nomads Animal Encounter on Facebook and TikTok. We'd love to see you there.
For over 100 years, people have driven this lonely stretch of country road hoping to see one thing, a glowing light no one can fully explain. Welcome back to Tea with a Twist. Grab your favorite drink and let's get started. Tonight, I'm drinking a 0-calorie peach pina colada flavored water. Tonight's story takes us to the Missouri-Oklahoma border. Locals have reported seeing a mysterious glowing orb for well over 100 years. They call it the Hornet Spook Light. Witnesses describe it as a bright ball of light that appears in the distance, changing colors from white to orange or green, and sometimes seems to move toward people before suddenly disappearing. Over the years, people have suggested everything from headlights to swamp gas and atmospheric effects. Others believe it's something that has never been fully explained. Whatever the cause, generations of visitors still drive that lonely stretch of road hoping to catch a glimpse for themselves. So here's my question. If the same story survives for 100 years, what keeps people coming back? One road, one mysterious light, and more than a century of eyewitness stories. Whether it's science, folklore, or something no one has fully explained yet, the legend of the Hornet Spook Light continues to fascinate visitors today. Have you ever been there?
Want to see something scary? Have you ever heard about the Crying Boy paintings? No? Let me tell you about it.
In the 1950s, a Spanish artist named Giovanni Bergonli created a series of paintings that showed close-ups of a small child weeping. These paintings became surprisingly popular across England, which resulted in a mass production of these prints to be distributed across the country. Houses, businesses, restaurants, and the like all enamored with the paintings, but this widespread fame suddenly shifted to something more sinister. One September morning in I'm gonna kill myself. I'm gonna kill myself. Okay, take fucking 500. One September morning in 1985, I can't do this. Girl. One cool morning, holy shit! Holy shit! Come on! I'm ready. One cool September morning in 1985, British townfolk opened the morning paper expecting nothing exciting, only to be met with an article titled "The Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy." What had happened is one couple's house housing one of the Crying Boy paintings started on fire when they were cooking breakfast and their pan lit a flame. The entire house burned down. The entire house, save for their painting of the Crying Boy. Rapidly, reports of similar happenings poured in. People reported this painting causing deaths of their family members, of pets, the painting not catching fire even when engulfed in flames, and even the fire station had to admit that fires are caused by the carelessness of people, but they even said that it was very strange because 50 of these fires, more than 50, had been happening with the Crying Boy painting since 1973, and in all of these happenings, the painting remained completely unharmed. The mass hysteria eventually got too much, and the newspaper company The Sun declared that anybody in possession of one of the paintings could send it in and they would get rid of it for them. So on Halloween night, they burned 2,500 copies of the painting. Why was the painting such a sudden hit? Was the craze a curse of the painting itself? It's hard to say. Although this painting interests me, it's just not a whisk. A whisk? It's not a whisk? Shut the f- Although this painting interests me, possessing it isn't a risk that I'd be willing to take. However, if you ever go to your local thrift store and stumble upon a painting of a weeping child, just hope you don't get the same temptation.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Scary and True with Haley. Today I'm going to be doing doppelganger horror stories. Stay tuned for the end and I will tell you about a doppelganger encounter that I personally had. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. My girlfriend and I were setting up some furniture in her basement. I told her I'd be right back. I went out the door and up the stairs to go to the bathroom. She had come up a minute later asking if I had come back downstairs. I hadn't. She began to explain to me that I came back into the basement, stared her down, and walked into the laundry room. She went to investigate to see what was wrong with me, but nothing was there, and I had been in a whole different area of her house. The house was built in 1912, and it's very active with ghosts. Her mother has seen a mimic of my girlfriend a few times as well. Another one is, I remember way back when I was still in high school. I was playing games on my computer when my mom opened the door, peeked her head in, and told me she was home for lunch. So I literally thought nothing of it. The only thing I felt off was the blue shirt she was wearing, which I've never seen her wear before. But then again, I never cared much about those sort of details to begin with. Anyways, an hour goes by and my mom opens up the door. She peeks her head in and tells me she just went on lunch and wanted to know if I wanted to get some of her fries. I told her that I had just seen her an hour ago and that she told me she was on lunch and how she was wearing a blue shirt, which at this point, she was wearing a white shirt. She looked confused and told me that she hadn't been home from work since she had left for work that morning and that it was 1 p.m. when she usually takes lunch. I still don't know if it was a doppelganger or if it was a spirit or if I had like a weird mental moment, but I never got a scared feeling nor out of worldly presence from who I believe to be my mom. Moving on to the last story after I take a drink break. Pepsi's good, Mountain Dew's way better. Argue with law. No, I'm just joking now. Then you'll look crazy. Back to the story. Around 15 years ago, both my kids were toddlers. I was putting them to bed one night, and one of my sons was adamant that he wears his favorite red race car pajamas to bed. I happily obliged, helped him change into them, and tucked them into bed. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with my friend who had come over to chat and catch up. The way my apartment was set up was that you could see my kids' bedroom doorway from the kitchen table. My friend and I were talking for a while before we were suddenly interrupted by the sound of my son screaming. We both turned and looked at the bedroom. We both saw my son standing there, loudly crying and shrieking, and wearing his green pajamas with airplanes on them. Everything inside of me was screaming that this was wrong. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and a cold shiver shot down my spine. My friend and I, without speaking, stared at each other for a second. We both knew that my son couldn't change his pajamas by himself yet. We looked back at the doorway, and my son was gone. We ran to the bedroom and found him tucked in the bed, still sleeping peacefully in his red race car pajamas. My friend asked me if I saw him standing there in his green airplane pajamas, and I confirmed that I had. My friend freaked out and left. I slept on my kid's bedroom for that night to make sure everything was okay. My friend and I still talk about it to this day. It's one of the craziest things that's ever happened to me. My son, of course, doesn't remember any of it. But he loves hearing the story of how his doppelganger scared the crap out of us. LOL. Now, real quick, I'm going to tell you the story of an encounter with a doppelganger I, and technically my brother, had, but I don't even know if he remembers it. So, we, as in me, my dad, my grandpa's girlfriend Glenda, my Aunt Sharon, my brother Todd, we all went to Florida for summer vacation, but we had managed our way over into Alabama. We went to this water park place thing or whatever. I can't even remember the name of it. It's been so long. But I thought it was kind of weird because, for one, my brother only wears swimming trunks. He does not wear like the whole shirt and set and everything, whatever it is. Anyways, I walked out of the bathroom and saw what looked like my brother's face. It was so weird. And I was like, is that Todd? And I was like, no way. Todd does not wear all that extra stuff, you know? So eventually I found my actual brother, Todd. And I told him, I was like, oh my God, I saw somebody that was just like you. He's like your twin. And then he looked at him. And then the guy, whoever it was, he kind of turned to where Todd could see more of his face. And he was like, I'm the better looking one. So I'm sorry to say it. That wasn't really a creepy encounter, but I mean, it was so funny because he's like, I'm the better looking one. So, but yes, that was my encounter. I have never really seen anyone that looks like me, other than I'm from Kentucky, of course. And they had this like farmer magazine that came out like when I was like 11, which was like 12 years ago. And there was this girl in front of the tractor or whatever, and she looked just like me at that age. I was like, oh my God, that looks just like me. But seeing someone in real life that looks just like me, no. They say it's not a good sign. So, I don't know. But my brother, knock on wood, didn't have anything bad happen to him right after that. So, yeah, that was my encounter of my brother's doppelganger. Okay, hope I didn't keep you too long, and I hope you enjoyed the stories, and I hope you enjoyed my little encounter with my brother's doppelganger. And if you have any encounters, if you have any stories, you can message me or comment below. I hope you have a good day or night whenever you're watching this. Follow me for more content. I will be doing my next post real soon. And until then, I will see you in the next video. Bye.
I have a story time about Ouija boards. Now, this didn't happen to me, but it happened to a friend of mine. And it's like a little precautionary little tale. And the reason this kind of triggered something is because I've been watching, I think they're called the Spiritual Gateway. They've been coming on my feed, and these two English ladies from England who've been using a Ouija board to communicate with their higher selves or their guides or whatever, but they've been doing it the right way. I mean, they've been setting the intention, and the answers that they've been getting are amazing. So I would suggest you guys go over and check out, because they have a bunch of stuff that they do, which is amazing. I love it.
So Susie's parents moved into this new house, and everything was great. It was closer to the school. They moved into town, so everything was wonderful. She had her own. There was I think 5 kids in the house or whatever. So the house was big enough that each kid could have their own room, which is great. So Susie chose her room. All of a sudden, pretty much within the first couple of months of them moving there, Susie started to get not feel well. She started to get sick and stay home a lot. We noticed that she wasn't at home with school. It would be, at first it was a couple days, and then she'd come in and we're just what's going on? And we noticed that she was just energetically was just really low, not herself, very quiet. So again, we're just what's going, and then it went from a couple of days to all of a sudden now she's home weeks, and she's going to the doctors and doesn't understand what the hell's going on. So one of Susie's friends her name is Diane. And she decided that, you know what, I haven't seen you in a while. Is it okay if I come and see your new house? I think Diane had been there before, but hadn't done a sleepover. And because they hadn't seen each other at school, she's like, how about we do a sleepover? I come over, I'll stay the weekend, and I'll bring my Ouija board. I just got a brand new Ouija board, and we can play, and we can just do whatever. I would say there were probably about 11 or 12 at this time. So Susie goes over to, Diane goes over to Susie's house. They start playing with the Ouija board. Now, the first couple of days, or the first day that she's there, it's just they're playing with the Ouija board. Everything's going okay. I guess they're just it's scaring them. They're turning off all the lights and lighting a candle and just kind of doing whatever, kids do. And the Ouija board isn't really... Now, this part of the story I got from Diane, and I'm trying to remember everything that she said because it's been a long time. But anyways, she said that they would ask questions on the Ouija board, and it wouldn't really answer the questions. It kept spelling out different things, and it was just weird answers. It wasn't, she said, apparently Diane would use the Ouija board at her house, and she would get answers yes or no answers. Susie's house, it was kind of weird. Either it would answer or it wouldn't at all, and it would just go really crazy all over the board. So, and the first night, she was it's kind of weird. And then the next day is kind of where it started to go sideways. So, they decide that they're going to do the Ouija board again. I'm not sure if they did it at night or during the day. It didn't matter. I know the room was, they did the same setup. The room was dark, the lit candle. I'm not sure what the intention that they set in. Probably because their kids and they know we're doing it. They were just whatever's here, which is probably usually what you do. And all of a sudden, it started going crazy again. To the point where the pointer thing flew off of the board. And she's like, that's never done before. So they kind of said, maybe it was just one of them, blah, blah, blah. So they went and they picked it up again, started again on it. This time, it started spelling out K-I-L-L, you, self. And they're like, what? So they decided, and then it went crazy, and again, it flew off of the board. At that point, Diane got scared and decided, I'm not gonna sleep here. And I guess the things got really cold in the room. It was a different vibe. So she was like, yeah, that's it, we're done. So pulled up the shades. She calls her mom and says, hey, I need you to come and get me now. I'm not staying here another day or another night. And she did. Now, this is the part that I'm not 100% sure of. I don't know if Susie ended up getting her own board or Diane left her board there by accident. All I know is that the next few days or so, Susie didn't come to school at all. She got sicker, and then her mom. I remember hearing snippets because as a kid, your parents are talking, because my parents knew her parents, and you don't get they chew you out of the room. So she wasn't coming out of her room. She wasn't coming out of her room. She was in her room the whole time, and she was constantly doing the board. And what I had heard was that the board started when she finally found out, and the reason she found out was because she was, I guess one of her siblings came in and did the Ouija board with her or was watching her or something like that. And the board kept spelling out to pew pew yourself, pew pew your mom, pew pew your dad, pew pew your family. And it wouldn't like spell out anything else. It kept, you would ask a question and that's what it kept going back to. Now, I'm not sure if Diane ended up going back. I think she did for another visit, and she was the one who alerted the parents, or if the siblings alerted the parents. But yeah, things were not good for a while. Now, Susie had actually missed most of grade 7 and part of grade 8 when she finally came back to school, she was never really the same again with us, and she was very quiet. But before this, let me go back. When her parents finally found out what was going on, mainly because her parents really, I guess, didn't really believe that. They were just trying to figure out, they thought that, it was hormonal or whatever it was. I mean, it could have been. I mean, she was like 12 going on 13, but a lot of it also had to do with, all of a sudden they started sensing things in the house. The mother, or from what I've heard, remember the father started to get very violent. He started drinking a lot more than he normally did. He started to get really violent because I remember the police being called to the house a lot because he was being violent with them. And then I remember like a couple of people had gone that I knew that I'm not going to tell, but they went to visit, and all of a sudden one of them got pushed down the stairs. Like she fell down the stairs, but she's like, I felt like I was being pushed, and it kind of it really messed up her kneecap. And she was young. And then there was different things that would, the lights would flicker in the house for no reason at all. There was a lot of things that started happening in the house. So the mother ended up reaching out to someone in the community, and they ended up getting someone in there to smoke this thing out. And after multiple things done, the mother finally they asked, because it wasn't just smoking the house out. I believe Susie ended up having to get some stuff done to her as well, treatment and stuff like that. And then finally, she ended up getting better enough to go back to school, and she did. She came back to school and she did great, but she never really talked about it. And now I'm not sure if she was told never to really talk about it because afraid of it coming back or whatever it was, but I'm sure that was quite the ordeal for her to go through. So we never really got a lot of any firsthand accounting from her, very little of it. We just know that they finally got everything together and they still lived in the house. But I later on found out stuff about the house and why, possibly why some of that stuff was happening. But if you want to know about the house, just let me know. But yeah, be careful about Ouija boards and what you call in.
These cages weren't built to keep the dead from getting out. They were actually built to keep people from getting in. These cages on top of graves have become more associated with vampire lore lately. And the idea, if the undead wakes up, you gotta keep them buried. But this is actually not true. These are called mort safes, and they're designed for one reason and one reason only: to keep grave robbers out of them. In the late 1700s, early 1800s, families began to actually put these giant cages above freshly dug graves. At the time, medical schools were desperately needing human bodies so that they could study anatomy. But donating your body to science wasn't common, and there wasn't enough legally available cadavers. So the black market emerged, and groups known as resurrectionists would actually sneak into graveyards at night, dig up freshly buried bodies, and sell them to anatomy schools. And weirdly, stealing a body itself wasn't treated as a serious crime because legally a corpse wasn't considered personal property in the same way that possessions were, and grave robbers would face charges like disturbance of a grave, stealing a burial item. Families became absolutely terrified, so they had to find a way to fight back. Some would hire guards to watch the graves overnight, others would booby trap them essentially, use tripwires, watch houses. But wealthier families actually had the option to add these massive iron cages over the graves, and they would stay there in place for several weeks, long enough for the body to decompose and be no longer of value to a grave robber. And it could be removed and used by another family. But one of the most infamous cases to come out of this is these two dudes right here, William Hare and William Burke. And instead of digging up the dead, they realized that it was more profitable and more efficient to just take some people out and sell their fresh bodies directly to an anatomist. And they took the lives of at least 16 people before they were eventually caught. The public outrage over what they did led to the Anatomy Act of 1832, which expanded the legal supply of bodies for medical education and reduced the incentive for grave robbing. Sometimes the scariest stories in history aren't about ghosts or vampires, it's what people are willing to do to each other.
Hey y'all, I just read a really funny ghost story, and just to keep me from telling it wrong or whatever, I'm just gonna read it to you guys. This is I accidentally became the ghost haunting my own apartment building. It says, a few months ago, people in my apartment building started talking about a ghost. It started with small things. Someone would hear footsteps in the hallway at 3 a.m. Another person claimed they saw a shadow standing near the stairwell before it disappeared. One neighbor swore they heard someone whisper hello when nobody was there. The rumor spread fast. The funny part is that I knew exactly what was happening. I work night shifts and usually get home around 3 a.m. To avoid waking my roommates, I quietly take the stairs instead of the elevator. I also have a habit of talking to myself when I'm tired. One night, while carrying the groceries, I dropped a bag. An elderly neighbor opened her door just as I bent down to pick everything up. The hallway light flickered at the exact moment. I screamed. She screamed. I panicked and sprinted up the stairs. The next morning, the building's WhatsApp group exploded. Apparently, she had seen a dark figure crouching in the hallway that vanished when the lights flickered. The ghost stories got crazier every week. Someone posted blurry CCTV screenshots. Another person claimed the ghost only appeared after midnight. A third person said it was probably the spirit of a former tenant. I stayed quiet because honestly it was hilarious. Then management announced that they were installing extra security cameras because residents felt unsafe. At that point, I felt guilty and admitted to everything. But nobody believed me. Even after I explained the late night shifts, the stairs, the dropped groceries, and the flickering lights, several neighbors insisted I was covering up the existence of the ghost. One guy actually said, well, that's exactly what a ghost would want us to think. To this day, people still talk about the building ghost, and apparently I'm not the ghost. I'm just the guy who lives on the 3rd floor. I loved it. I had to share it with you guys. Do y'all have any, ghost stories like that or anything funny that you could share? If so, let me know.
I hope you all stitch this video right now. Tell me one time that you experienced something so frightening, so scary, that you would be completely crazy to tell anyone else about it. One night, I just got out of work actually that night. I pulled up to the driveway of my house and I just decided to just be there quietly before I walked inside for just 5 minutes. And I accidentally fell asleep. And I just woke up to what seemed to be someone just literally just being in my presence. When I looked up, right through my windshield, there was a woman, an Asian woman to be exact, literally kind of like spider, kind of stand right over my windshield, looking down at me very awkwardly, very puppet style, looking down at me. Not blinking, nothing. She looks just pale and afraid. And me, that experience was nothing I've ever felt before. I felt like I was just paralyzed where I was, on that chair, just looking up at that thing staring at me. Meanwhile, it was around 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, so there's no reason why anyone would have been outside. I live in a dead-end street. It was my house, my neighbor's house, the lake. And then on the other side was my very weird voodoo practice, voodoo priest, Caucasian guy who lived in Haiti for 10 years. And that's who I lived across. And I was so scared just looking at this thing for a good minute until I snapped out of it and ran back into my house. I told that story before, but I'm just thinking about it, how scary that was. And that like how many times I got hesitant of telling anyone that story, even my wife, at that time. Because it was just like so crazy. I didn't know what I was looking at and what I was experiencing. And then you know what's even more scary? Is the fact the next day I woke up and I went back to the car and I'm looking at the windshield and you can see the footprint of that woman, her handprint of that woman still on the windshield.
Let's read another true and scary story. This one comes from McKenna. While renting a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains, I saw something horrible. Just a couple years ago, when I was 14, my family took a trip to Virginia. We rented out this cabin in the Appalachian Mountains. Once we arrived there, I explored our Airbnb and then took a trip down this path that led to a trail into the mountains. I was with my brother, and for about 30-ish minutes, everything was normal. We were looking at the beautiful views and even listening to the birds chirp. Then all of a sudden, it's like the whole forest went quiet. There were no birds chirping, and our footsteps felt even a little too loud. Then we heard a woman's voice out in the tree line in front of us say, "Hey." It didn't sound right. It sounded like a human, but something just felt off. Almost like something trying to mimic a woman's voice. It sounded too far away, but at the same time, so clear and so close. It kept repeating it, at least 4 or 5 times, but it sounded the exact same every single time. Almost like it was recorded and kept replaying over and over. My brother wanted to go over and try and see if there was anyone there, but I told him not to because something just felt extremely off. We agreed and turned back the way we came. Once we made it back to our cabin, we debriefed about what the hell just happened. My brother and I started to ask ourselves questions like, why didn't we see anyone? Why did it sound so off?
2 kids going missing at the exact same time with little to no clues or explanations left behind is rare. But when it does happen, it is incredibly bizarre, and this is one of those cases. Siblings Jack and Lily Sullivan disappeared in May of last year at the exact same time. One second, their mom heard them in the kitchen laughing and playing. The next, they vanished into thin air. No sign of them leaving the house, no sign of them in the dense wilderness surrounding the home, just gone. I went down the rabbit hole with this case, and even so, absolutely nothing about it makes sense. But let's lay out the timeline and talk about it. Like I said, this is Lily and Jack Sullivan. They were 6 and 4 years old when they suddenly disappeared on May 2nd, 2025. They lived in Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia on a really remote and isolated piece of property with their mom, Malaya, their stepdad, Daniel, and their 1-year-old baby sister, Meadow. Also living on the property just behind them in a separate trailer was Daniel's mom, Janie. From the outside looking in, this was just your ordinary family. Lily was described as a super outdoorsy 6-year-old, very girly, and loved baking and playing with dolls. Jack was only 4 and a lot quieter than his sister, but he loved animals and playing with his dinosaur toys. They seemed to be living a completely normal life, but one summer night, that would all change. This story really begins on April 30th, 2025. Jack and Lily stayed home from school that day as it was a professional development day for teachers, so there was no school that day. The Sullivan family spent the day running errands, which they finished at around 10 that night. They were grocery shopping, and that's when they finally returned home. Then, that Thursday and Friday, so May 1st and May 2nd, the siblings stayed home from school once again. Their stepdad, Daniel, said that they stayed home from school because Lily had a cough and was sick. The last time the kids were ever seen alive in public and outside of their home was on May 1st, 2025. The family had traveled to nearby New Glasgow where they went to Dollarama, and Jack and Lily were seen on security footage from the store that day at around 2:25 p.m. At this point, everything seemed normal and okay. Their mom, Malaya, said that she put the kids to bed that night at around 9 or 10 p.m., and she quickly went to bed too with baby Meadow. But Daniel stayed up later than everyone else, and as far as I can find, it's not clear what time he actually came to bed that night. This brings us to May 2nd, 2025. That morning, a little after 6 a.m., Malaya marked Jack and Lily absent from school, again stating that it was due to illness. Between 8 and 9
So listen to me.
9:40 a.m., both Malaya and Daniel said that they were in their bedroom with Meadow as she was just waking up. During that time, they said that Lily came in and out of the bedroom several times, and that they heard Jack in the kitchen playing and laughing. Then suddenly, all of those sounds just stopped, according to Malaya and Daniel. It was like 1 second the house was filled with noise and kids having fun, and the next, dead silence. So they poked their heads out of the bedroom, and the house was completely empty. No sign of the kids anywhere. After this, Jack and Lily were never seen alive again. This is where the story gets really bizarre. So apparently, just the night before, Daniel put a wrench on top of the front door for whatever reason. But that morning, after the kids vanished, it was still perfectly in place and undisturbed. This led Malaya and Daniel to believe that the kids did not go outside via the front door. At this point, they were thinking maybe the kids went out the back sliding door and were just playing in the backyard or the woods surrounding the home. And this was a real possibility because, according to them, that back sliding door is essentially silent when opened. So they looked out back and around the house, but found no sign of Jack or Lily. It was like they vanished into thin air. This is when they turned to Daniel's mom, Janie, who lived just out back in a separate trailer. Now, Janie said that morning, she awoke around 8:50 a.m. to the sound of her dog barking. Then she heard what she thought sounded like Jack and Lily playing on the swings and laughing in the backyard. At this point, no one knew that the kids were missing or about to go missing. So Janie said she fell back asleep without looking. Meanwhile, Malaya and Daniel were scouring the woods surrounding the family home. And according to Daniel, he heard something chilling. He heard what he thought was one of the kids screaming deep in the woods, but he wasn't 100% sure because at the same time that he was hearing this, he said that a helicopter flew above him, drowning the sound out. Well, eventually around 10 a.m., Malaya called 911 to report her kids missing. When the RCMP arrived on scene, Daniel told them what he had heard, and paired with the fact that 2 kids were now missing and could be lost in the woods or possibly even abducted, you'd think authorities would issue an Amber Alert to immediately notify the public. But in this case, they didn't. I guess Lily and Jack's disappearance didn't meet the requirements for the alert to be issued, which is crazy. The RCMP initially didn't even think foul play was involved. They thought the kids simply just wandered away and would be found soon. But by 5 p.m., when the kids were still missing, they started to get a bit more serious about the situation. This is when they finally notified the public and updated the kids as vulnerable missing people. The next day, so now May 3rd, police brought in tracking dogs that were specialized in searching for humans and human remains. They used drones and helicopters, and 100 volunteers joined in the search for Jack and Lily. While they didn't find the kids, they did find 2 other things that are suspicious. The first being a boot print in the mud in the family's driveway. The tracking dogs actually found this as they traced the kids' scent to the boot print. Police confirmed that this print did belong to one of the kids. But again, this is where the story gets really bizarre, because Janie, Daniel's mom, admitted something kind of weird. She said that the night before the kids disappeared, in the very same spot as that boot print was discovered, she had been raking the gravel. She said it was to put in a pool, but immediately this kind of stood out to a lot of people. Like, this took place with insane timing right before the kids disappeared. And why wait until nightfall and in May to start raking for a pool? It's just odd. So one boot print was found, as well as the children's scent in the driveway. But then relatives of the family found something even stranger. Dangling from a tree on Lansdowne Station Road, about half a mile from the house, was a piece of Lily's pink blanket, the one she always slept with and the one she went to bed wrapped up in the night before she disappeared. What's weird is that the tracking dogs were taken to that exact spot to see if they could detect a human scent, but they couldn't. Not long after this, police found something even more suspicious. In a garbage bag at the end of the family's driveway was a matching piece of that same exact blanket, Lily's pink blanket. According to Malaya, she said she threw Lily's blanket away a week earlier and that it had nothing to do with the children's disappearance. But Daniel told a different story. Daniel said that he himself actually ripped up the blanket to use it as a do-it-yourself draft blocker for one of their doors. So with these new findings, the search only ramped up. As each day came and went, more volunteers would join, and more than 25 miles of the thick, dense wilderness and even the Middle River nearby was searched. But this turned up absolutely nothing. I mean, the dogs brought in for the search were highly trained in detecting human remains, and with how much they searched, it seems as though the kids would have been found if they were still in the woods. This has led many people to question whether or not they were ever in the woods to begin with. What didn't help was the heavy rain and fog that rolled in the days following Jack and Lily's disappearance. At this point, police still weren't fully suspecting foul play, but then new information came to light that made this situation even more disturbing. So a day after the kids disappeared, Malaya called the police and told them they needed to investigate Jack and Lily's estranged biological dad, Cody Cody Sullivan. She said that Cody could have taken them across the border to New Brunswick. So they went straight to Cody's house, but again, they found no sign of the kids. Furthermore, Cody said that he hadn't even seen his kids in 3 years. Cody was heavily investigated and interrogated, and he was even given a polygraph test in relation to the kids' disappearance, which he passed. Authorities were able to quickly rule him out, but they still heavily monitored the toll plaza on the highway leading to and from New Brunswick, as well as the New Brunswick border and every airport in the area. They were hoping this wasn't an abduction case, but they were monitoring these areas just to be sure. Because of how strange this case was, with 2 kids vanishing at the exact same time, with only a few sinister clues left behind, this case gained international attention, and fast. Malaya gave news interviews pleading for her kids' safe return, and the searches still continued, even though they were significantly scaled back a week after their disappearance. Police have stated that there is no indication or any evidence of the kids being abducted, but they did say that at this point, it's unlikely that they are still alive. More than 11 RCMP units worked on this case, along with the Major Crimes Unit and Crime Analysis Service, and together they investigated over 500 tips and interviewed so many people. But again, this turned up nothing, and to this day, the kids have never been found. About a week after Jack and Lily disappeared, Malaya packed up her belongings and took baby Meadow to go live with her family in Nova Scotia, leaving Daniel behind. She then blocked him on all of her social media accounts, and according to some newly unsealed, previously redacted court documents, this might have been for good reason. So obviously Malaya interviewed with police right after her kids disappeared, but she told them some pretty disturbing information. She said that Daniel had been physically abusive towards her and had held her down, pushed her, and was always extremely controlling. Malaya even admitted to using a Wi-Fi based messaging app called Text Plus to secretly contact her family the morning Jack and Lily disappeared. What exactly she said in those texts, or if she was planning on leaving Daniel, we don't know. But Malaya said after those texts were sent, she then deleted the software. According to those newly unsealed documents, there was even evidence that Daniel had an explosive outburst the morning of the kids' disappearance. Then we all know what happened next. When police brought these allegations up to Daniel, he of course denied them and said he was never abusive. But this just does not look good. Then some even more alarming information came out about the night the kids vanished. So in the early morning hours of May 2nd, neighbors of the Sullivans, Brad Wong and Justin Smith, said they for sure heard a loud vehicle moving to and from the Sullivans' property. So Brad's house sits at a slightly elevated level than the Sullivans, so he can kind of see their property. Well, Brad said that night he saw vehicle lights cutting across the treetops, and he had heard a vehicle leave the property around 6 separate times. Justin, who was the other neighbor, even confirmed this. Justin said he heard a vehicle turn around near the railroad tracks by all 3 of their properties. When this information was relayed to Daniel by the police, who obviously questioned him about it, he denied all of it and called it nonsense. He said the only car they had access to was Malaya's, which wasn't loud like the neighbors were saying, and it hadn't moved from the yard that night. But what's super weird to me is that if 2 separate neighbors heard this, how didn't Daniel, who was still awake at this time, in his house? Why did he go to bed later than everyone else? And what was he doing up so late? And also, how did Janie or Malaya not hear this either? They were sleeping, but home. So with this new information, Daniel and Malaya were given polygraph tests, and the total results weren't released, at least not from what I can find. But what was released was that some of their responses to specific questions were deemed truthful. Now, Janie, Daniel's mom, was also given a polygraph, and her results were inconclusive. I mean, maybe she was telling the truth, but it's frustrating because she was the only adult outside of the home that claimed to have at least heard the kids outside the morning they disappeared. So since her results were inconclusive, this has led many people to question if they were ever really outside that morning, or if they never actually made it out of the house. It's tough because Janie said she woke up to her dog barking and thought she heard the kids, but it could be totally possible that she was still half asleep and dreaming. But with her admitting to raking the gravel in the driveway the night before, where the kids' boot print was eventually found, I don't know. This all seems super odd to me. Since Malaya packed up and left Daniel and her reports of domestic violence, this does not look good for him. And at one point, her family even accused Daniel of being involved in Jack and Lily's disappearance. I guess they found out that Daniel was known to use meth and cocaine, so they suspect that maybe he knows more than what he's saying. And what doesn't help is that in January of this year, Daniel was arrested, but on unrelated charges of SA, assault, and forced forcible confinement. I guess these charges stem from a 2024 incident at the property just 5 months before Jack and Lily disappeared. And they involve an adult victim, which I'm assuming is Malaya, but I could be wrong. Daniel was arraigned around the 1-year anniversary of the kid's disappearance, and last I heard was that his case and trial for that was pushed back to this month, July 2026. So we're still waiting on some answers for that. There are so many layers to this case, and with the allegations against Daniel, it just feels like something really sinister happened to those kids on that property. Police have reviewed 8,000 video files from dash cams, trail cams, and nearby security systems. And even though there are still searches being conducted to this day, Jack and Lily Sullivan have never been found. But there are a few theories as to what could have happened to them. One theory that I've seen a lot of people talk about online is that Janie's dog was responsible. I mean, we know that she woke up that morning to her dog barking, and we know that she was raking the gravel in the driveway. So maybe they were trying to cover up an accidental animal attack. I feel like this theory isn't super likely because I feel like evidence would have been found by now if that was the case. Theory number 2 was that Jack and Lily either got into drugs on the property and died, or they were taken over a drug debt. This theory stems from Daniel's alleged past drug use. But I did want to note that police did search their property and found no evidence of drugs in the home. Theory number 3 is that maybe Jack and Lily did run off in the woods to go and play, and maybe an accident happened that killed them. This is a real possibility because of how remote the property is. And it's also interesting to note that during the search, police found a t-shirt and tricycle near the Middle River, but it turned out not to be Jack or Lily's. I keep thinking that maybe they found that toy and wanted to play with it and just accidentally fell into the river. I don't know if I entirely believe that, but it is a possibility. I feel like some sign of the kids would have been found by now if they were still in the woods though. And lastly, theory number 4 is that they were met with foul play, either by a stranger lurking in the woods or someone close to or in the family. A lot of people suspect Daniel or think that Malaya knows more than what she's letting on. Like I said, this case has so many layers, so I truly do not know what to believe. But what we do know is this. After being put to bed on the night of May 1st, 2025, no one has seen or heard from 6-year-old Lily or 4-year-old Jack Sullivan ever again. If you have any information on the disappearance of these 2 kids, you should contact Northeast Nova RCMP Major Crimes Unit at 902-896-5060 or Nova Scotia Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477 to remain anonymous. Someone out there knows exactly what happened to them, and it's time to bring them home. But it's now been 1 year. Yet whatever happened to Jack and Lily that day remains a mystery.